let's be honest, like a lot of tech companies provide the same products or like this very small differences in features. So to win the battle, you need to win before that, before it gets to like a price competition or a feature competition. You need to kind of win the battle of attention.
Before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part, you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free. And now, back to today's episode. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the SaaS SEO Show. I'm your host, George Casiotis, and today I'm very happy and excited to be joined by Gwen Lafage. I don't know, have I got it right?
You got it right.
Okay,
perfect.
That's great.
Thanks.
That's a good start. Gwen has dedicated her career to building strong brands around the world in cities like London, Paris, San Francisco, Stockholm, and the list goes on. She's a creative global marketing leader. She spent 10 years in the best advertising agencies working on the world's leading B2C brands before focusing on B2B marketing for tech companies in Silicon Valley and Stockholm. She's now the VP of brand and content at one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world, the customer communications cloud, Sinch. Is that
Sinch.
right? Sinch. Okay, Sinch.
Sinch. Yes.
That's great. Gwen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So even though I shared a couple of things about you, I would like to hear from you when it comes to your journey so far and how you made that shift from like B2C and working with like some of the world's biggest brands to tech and B2B tech more specifically.
Yeah. So I started in creative agencies, right? Like a long time ago. At the time we called it below the line. So we were doing like direct mail, and maybe I'm dating myself a bit now, but yeah, so direct mail, and then move into digital, working for like large brand, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, like very consumer focused. And then with my husband, we decided to move to Silicon Valley. He's American. We're like, why not? We can do it. Let's just go. And so we arrived in Silicon Valley with no job, and after a little while we both started working in tech because that's kind of what's happening there, right? Like, so I moved to a small creative agency, so B2B tech creative agency, and we would work with a lot of like tech scale-ups. I'll say at the time, like our biggest client was a company called Snowflake, and we started working with them when they were 200 people, right? Like, so we kind of grew together with them. And then I had the opportunity to move to Stockholm to open our European office with the same agency. I did that for a few years and realized that I wanted to try to see how it was on the dark side, right? On the other side, like, let's try to see how it's in-house. And I got the opportunity to start working at Sinch, as they were looking for someone to lead their brand team. So it was the timing aligned, good opportunity. I've been there now for almost 2 years.
I thought the dark side is, what I do, like agency, what you used to do. I don't know. I've never been in-house.
Maybe.
So I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. I guess I didn't know either, right? I had done like my whole career on the agency side. And I think I enjoyed it very much, but I really wanted to see what it was like to be in-house and get kind of the whole picture, right? Like, I think when you agency, you get to work on only a small piece of the puzzle. And our agency was specialized in doing brand and website, and then sometimes you give the baby to the client and they rip it apart, right? Yeah, so I just really wanted to like have a bit more control on the execution side and like try to follow the whole process and also be closer to the impact you can have in marketing towards the whole company, right? Like I think seeing the business results that you don't always see when you're on the agency side. So
Yeah.
that was a good move, but yes.
So you're at Sinch, and for people who have never heard of Sinch, don't know what the platform does, could you please share a couple of things?
Yes. So we are customer communications cloud, which means that we deliver like communication solutions to brands that want to communicate in all of different available ways with their audiences. So we kind of help them, we enable or we directly power meaningful conversations throughout the customer journey. And that could be through SMS, instant messaging channels, email, voice. We basically have the technology who allows them to simplify their communications and allow those communications to happen. It's a very communication is very siloed and is very tricky because each channels operate quite differently. So it's really hard for brands to get to have that kind of sense of how to do that. Like there's a lot of complexity in the technology, in the regulation. So we started with SMS as our main channel, and that we grew to enabling all the different communication solutions.
Is the ideal customer like enterprises, or is this a solution for smaller businesses as well?
So Sinch has like a crazy growth. Like when I joined, we were maybe 800 people, and now we are more than 4,000. And part of the growth was through organic growth, but also through acquisition. And now we have enterprise go to market. Self-serve from a developer perspective. We deliver APIs, so a lot of the developers can just like take the APIs and build the solutions. And now we have an SMB side of the business. So if you're like a local shop and you want to text your customer that their appointment is coming, or you want to WhatsApp them to remind them of the appointment, like we enable that also for small businesses. But at the beginning, we're more focused on like super large enterprise. So 8 out of 10 of the biggest tech companies in the world are customers. Uber is a good example. Zoom, we enable voice like for Zoom. So I think there's a lot of super large companies that we work with.
I had no idea that the company is so big and that it's growing so fast.
Yes.
Can I ask what was like, and what is in general the first thing that you do when you take over, like as a VP of brand and content? Like, is it competitive analysis? Is it like an audit? Is it something else?
So I guess my experience was maybe not the norm and maybe was a bit special because I joined at a time when we already had a rebrand in process, and my first job was to implement. So basically, in the first few months, we had to finalize the brand and launch a new website. So I had like no time to kind of like spend on trying to like audit stuff and analyze that for 3 months. It was right on like implementation, and had to just directly like jump in, right? So I think that was part of it. And then at the same time, we were on a acquisition journey. So in the first year that I joined, we acquired 4 companies. So, and I was doing both brand and marketing M&A. So I was involved in every single acquisition that we did. So I think my first 6 months or year was not really your typical journey.
I understand.
So
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
yeah, you just have to go with the flow and like what the company's priorities were and what, what the company was doing at that time. But I mean,
Yes.
if you had to do it like all over again, what would you say
Yep.
is like the best starting point for someone in your position? Like, what would you say they should start with?
I would say you should start by getting a good understanding products do. So in like small SaaS company, that could be a matter of a week, right? Like in a company like Sinch, our portfolio is huge. So I even after 2 years, I'm not sure I understand all of our products. Well, I'm pretty sure I don't actually. So because we have a lot of different solutions and APIs, and we also have like the telecom infrastructure in a way. So I think understanding what the company does deeply and understanding the product deeply, I think is super important for anyone in marketing. And then understanding the audiences, like who you're like really targeting, who you're talking to, who have been buying the product. I will say I will start there. And then, yeah, looking into the competitors, but I feel like it's probably more important because it doesn't, you're not sure the competitors are doing things right? So I think like understanding what you sell and who's buying, I think is the first thing that I will do if I'll start a new company today.
From what I hear, since this case, it's also difficult because I sense that the use cases are so many, and you have like dedicated SaaS for each of these use cases. For example, just for text messaging, just for chat, like on your website. So and there are solutions that do just that. Okay, so it's kind of
Yep.
tricky to map out like the whole, let's say, competitive landscape. And a question I have for you is, how do you approach brand strategy? And I mean, what is your definition of brand strategy, and how do you approach it at Sinch?
Exactly. I think there's like different pillars of what we call brand strategy. Like one pillar for me has been, and it's again like specific, I guess, to Sinch and our journey, but has been around defining the brand architecture. So when you acquire a company, it comes with like new brands, right? Like you acquired their brand. We acquired a company that had actually several brands. So we ended up with like a pretty large portfolio of brands. And I think part of the strategy is defining what is the architecture, what brand do you keep, what brand you retire, what do you merge together, and that needs to align very closely with the product roadmap, understanding what the future of the products and the consolidation will happen, but also understanding what are the kind of current attachment to the brands you buy, and like do we transform them into becoming Sinch and retire them, or do we keep them as product brand, or like so I think that's one side. The second side that we've worked on a lot has been to redefine our story. So to work on our positioning. So now that we had all of those new technologies and a broader portfolio, we had to tell a different story, right? Like what it is that Sinch does. So we spent quite a lot of time defining the positioning and talking to customers, talking to like some prospects, aligning internally on like how do we tell that story. And then I think the third pillar is more on the brand awareness side, on like how do you actually, once you have those foundations, how do you go to market with your brand in a way, right? Like and what type of campaigns or content do you need, or approach do you need to have to drive brand awareness? So there's different pillars to the brand strategy.
Acquisitions aside, though, do you think that this role is important for SaaS companies nowadays? We are talking about a company that doesn't like go out to like acquire other businesses. Is it important for them to have a person who is just like focusing on the brand side of things?
Yes, I think it's super important. I think that's it is like defining the foundation. So a lot of people think of brand as the visual identity, right? Which is important. I think like you do need to have like a strong visual identity to stand out, and try to differentiate, right? Like it's a very crowded marketplace, right? And you might have your list of competitors, but in reality, you don't only compete with them, you compete for attention and a share of your customer's wallet, right? So even if some companies are not your direct competitors, they might not decide to get your technology because they'll prioritize something else that have nothing to do with you. So I think because you need to stand out and differentiate, brand play a big role there. So you start with like your visual identity and your story. What is your value prop? What is like the storytelling, and how do you differentiate? Because let's be honest, like a lot of tech companies provide the same products or like this very small differences in features. So to win the battle, you need to win before that, before it gets to like a price competition or a feature competition. You need to kind of win the battle of attention and win almost like the battle of the heart, right? Like if people are a fan of your brand before they even need your product, you've done half of the journey. So I think it's super important to kind of have that, right? Like to really have people that focus on creating that connection with the audience.
Can I ask you something though? And I mean, I'm genuinely interested in that. Do you think that any of these things like is measurable? Like, I mean, how can you measure the impact of like you see where I'm going with this, right? Like, okay, you can say that some things may be a bit more straightforward, like we raise our brand awareness, for example, right? Or we get to hear from sales calls that people found us through this piece of content or that. Are there any other things that you see? And I mean, can you tie these like efforts to actual business outcomes, let's say, or metrics, let's say?
Yeah, so the ultimate like how do you measure brand question, right? Like I think I get it all the time, and it's a tricky one because because we're not in a direct response model, right? Like I think with digital marketing, you expect a direct response, and you have very good way to kind of see the results immediately. And we are in this era when we want everything immediately, right? Like we want kind of like the direct response now, and brand is not like that. Brand takes time. Brand is not like something you just like a switch you just put on and then immediately you see the results. So it's tricky, but I think you need to look at some indicators of seeing if your brand is working. And I think the stuff you can measure, right? Like when you do things right, you should have an impact on your organic traffic, on your branded search, people like searching more for you. You can also look into, especially for smaller SaaS company, look into social media and kind of like engagement that you get, the discussion you start having, how's your social selling kind of going, or customers or prospect mentioning your brand or your people when they come to you, right? Are people coming to you directly, or do you have to like reach out to everybody, right? I think, and also when you sales teams go out to like to prospect, have they heard about you, right? So there's a bunch of like softer softer way, I guess, to see if your brand is having some kind of impact, and some kind of indicator, right? Like leading indicators on like or lagging indicators, I guess, like on is it starting to have some kind of effect? But I think the tricky part with brand is that it's everywhere, right? Like in a way, everybody in the company should kind of be aligned on what the story is, on like how you present yourself, and they all kind of impact your brand, right? Because you can ruin your brand with someone just by having a bad customer support, right? Like, so I think, again, it's why it's not just the pretty visuals, right? It goes way deeper than that. So it's also not just one person in the company, but I think it helps to have someone in the company that owns it and kind of like help build it. So I think that's the way I see it.
As I see it, brand is like connected to mental availability. And what I say for us as an agency is that, you know what is important to me is that we are part of the conversation. When a person inside a SaaS company or a B2B company, let's say more broadly, wants to like, buy services like ours, I just want us to be one of the choices they will think of, even if at that time they choose to go with another vendor, right? But
Right.
being part of the conversation for like specific reasons, this is very important to me. And this concept of mental availability. And also I see the impact of brand when I have a couple of examples to share. For example, we had a prospect who reached out to us a few months ago. And when I asked them, like, how did you find us? This is the first question I ask when we get on sales calls. And they were like, you were recommended by a person who was working at an agency we used to work with. These agencies are competing agencies to ours. And I don't know this person. And I'm like, how is it possible that a person who works at a competing agency recommended us? I guess we are doing a good job, like communicating that we are good at the things that we, say we are good at, right? Or when you get on sales calls and you see all these different like touch points. Oh yeah, I watched the webinar you did with X, and then I read the blog post you did here. Then someone said something about you in a community, and then I decided to book a call. That's for me. Even though you can attribute, like, where can you attribute this, like this lead, let's say, or client or whatever.
Yep.
There is a value there, and brand definitely has to do something with all that.
Well, that's why you're doing a podcast, right? I think like, can you like attribute direct sales to your podcast? Well, probably not in each episode. Like, it's not you get like 5 new clients after each episode, right? But it's like you build kind of your presence, you build yourself as being like a trusted advisor on a specific topic. And to me, that's brand, right? Like, that's how you kind of build that trust before people are ready to even buy, or they might not be looking for an SEO agency, but they're like, oh yeah, I'm trying to learn about this topic. And then they might come to you. And then when they think about, oh, I need like an agency. Oh yeah, well, I've been listening to this podcast where they had great advice. Like, they make the connection. So that's the play. It's not like and it's long term and it takes time. But obviously, if you're doing it, that means that you're seeing some results, right?
Yeah, of course. One thing I would like to ask, obviously, in all these things, we kind of touch on that, which is content, obviously. And you are the VP of brand and content. And I would like to know, how do you approach content strategy? And also, how do these things overlap? I mean, is it that, our content strategy is driven, I don't know, by like 70%, 80% by our brand strategy. It's here to serve as a vehicle for us to communicate like what the brand is. And we have some like 20%, let's say, for experiments or content that's created for SEO purposes, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, I guess my question is, how do you approach content strategy, and how how connected it is to your brand strategy?
So content is tricky because I think like everything is content. I mean, the podcast is content, the videos, like blogs. You could argue that some of the sales deck or the webinar, like, everything in a way is content. So your website is content. Like, so the tricky part, I think, is that in a way, content could belong anywhere in a marketing team, because you have very different type of content, right? Product marketing is content, and then field needs content. Like, it fuels everything you do. So that's the really tricky part, I think, with content, is that you have to find the balance on where do you prioritize what it needs to fuel, right? Like, and I think it depends a lot of your go-to-market as well on like, your sales team needs content a lot. Like they will, if you're sales led, they'll have a lot of requests, right? Like, and it you need to kind of link to product marketing but you need to fill those campaigns. And if you're doing ABM, you need kind of like content in there. So I will say that the content approach that we have is kind of almost dual. You need to have content that is powered by the product, and that's maybe where you have more of the SEO type of content. And then you need content that helps you tell your story, your brand story, and the two kind of needs to connect. SEO is also kind of tricky because although everything is content, there's a lot of different ways SEO can play a role at different stage of the funnel. Although I'm not a huge fan of like the funnel because I don't believe that people come in at the top and go down and then you move them until they convert, right? Like they come wherever at any kind of stage. They might be looking for a product, although they don't really know the brand, or like it's not as kind of linear as we want it to be. It helps from a mental framework to have this kind of funnel concept. And the reality is that you need content throughout, right? Because you need to kind of appeal to people that are not problem aware, not solution aware, not brand aware, or etc. Right? Like, so I think you have to have this strategy that follows every step, and that's where it's complex, because to appeal to all of it, you need a lot of content. So I think our strategy is both way. We have we have a podcast that is kind of probably more on the awareness stage that doesn't talk about a product, and we interview some industry leaders on like their perspective of customer experience. And then we also do more kind of SEO driven type of blogs that focus on what people search. So then those two needs to connect, right? So yeah.
I agree with you. And also I like your point about the journey not being linear, which is kind of the hypothesis, or I don't know, assumption upon which the idea of a funnel is based on. But the reality is that, as you mentioned, like you just try to capture people and capture demand wherever people may be, right? It's not like it's linear. They start from there. What is, then how to, then I'm looking for solutions, then I'm comparing solutions or whatever. It's not like, ideally it would be like that in an ideal world, but it's in most cases it's not, especially with the competition that exists in most SaaS categories. One of your SEO plays, let's say, is your glossary. I would like to know what's as the ground for this idea, and whether or not the objective was like SEO or something else that we may be missing.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like or it is, I guess, an SEO play. But as with SEO, I don't believe in SEO for the sake of SEO, right? Like I think you want to educate your audience on things that you know. And I think it's important to give, I guess, definitions, right? Like, people will search for certain terms. So like if you can start by giving them that definition and educating them on specific topics and words, then you also participate in I guess the education phase. But yeah, it is like, I think every company with a developed, I guess, glossary as probably it drives traffic. It's just like getting in front of the audience and driving traffic to your site, right? It's kind of like I guess the objective with glossary, right? Like getting your site to rank and driving the traffic. Yeah.
I would like to ask you something completely different as we are kind of ready to start wrapping things up. And that would be your thoughts on AI content and everything that's been going on lately regarding ChatGPT and generative AI, generative content. I mean,
Yep.
how do you think this will impact what we do on the content side, maybe even on the brand side? I don't know if there are any use cases there. And
So,
yeah.
yep. Yeah, so we've had a lot of discussions, right? Obviously, like every content team, I think probably have had this discussion on like, do we use it? Do we not use it? How do we use it? Like, I think like LinkedIn is full of like 10 tips on like how to use ChatGPT for everything. I felt like, right? Like it's soon as like ask them to make coffee and clean your desk. But yeah, so I think I from a content team, I think it's something you cannot ignore. I think it is definitely I will think that every content marketers out there really need to take a look at it and see how they can use it. I think that we're still at the beginning of it. So I don't see it as a threat at all. I think like it can help automate or facilitate, speed up certain tasks and certain kind of type of content that you need to write, that is maybe short and a bit basic. I think it has like a place for that, which I think is a great tool. We'll see the evolution of it, and it's going to become more and more powerful. I think what's going to be really interesting from an SEO perspective and a search perspective is like, will it replace the way people search, right? Like, will people search through AI, and it will eliminate, I guess, this race to the top of the page, kind of, right? Like, because whatever the AI will like give you might become kind of the answer. People might not go and look at specific page. So will it change the whole SEO world? Will be quite interesting to see. How do you see it from an SEO agency? I think like that's probably something you've been thinking a lot about as well, right? I don't think it's there yet, so I don't think the risk is like immediate, but in the long term, this definitely it might completely change the SEO landscape.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of monitor the changes. We also took a stance on it. We will publish the kind of announcement on how we like use it. We use it and we experiment with it, but we will not use it for content creation, right? It's interesting though, because you know, in like in our company we have a form where anyone can like drop anonymous feedback, right, about how they feel about things, whatever. And lately I've been seeing people, I guess from the content team, content writers, expressing concern about that. Like, what is the company going to do? Is it going to replace us with AI? Which is not what we think about right now, right? So I think that this time is not like kind of the best to make decisions, because we don't really know. We are in the early stages of adoption right now. Mm-hmm. We definitely monitor the changes, and we are close to every change that happens, for like better or worse, but we will not use it. Never say never, but right now we will not use it for content creation. For other like tasks, micro tasks, like meta descriptions, title tags, or anything of that sort, yeah, who wants to do that, right? But yeah, for content creation, no, we want humans to write content, but we will see. No one knows what the future holds, right? And I think that all these things to come full circle, I guess, and close this episode, come to the, at least for me, I come to the realization that, okay, there will be a lot of content out there, brands competing on like keywords and things like that. But at the end of the day, what like matters is the brand, right? And this like concept of, as you said, I'm winning the battle before people even search or know that they are aware of a problem that they have, or I'm looking for a solution or whatever. Okay, so I'm winning this battle before that. And this is where brand comes into play. And I think brand will become like one of the most important aspects of marketing for SaaS companies.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think like thing that AI can't replace, right? It's like your tone of voice, your personality, your personal stories, right? Like things that actually makes the content more interesting and unique, right? Like AI doesn't know what you've done yesterday and what you had for lunch, right? Like I think it's like you need kind of those very human aspect. I believe like using it, you can definitely have it, and you need human to operate the AI as well, right? Like the content is as good as the person using it, I feel like. So if the person using it and like asking the right prompt and like playing with it to some extent, you can get deeper and better, but then it will never replace the storytelling, right? Which I think is super important for brands in such a way to differentiate, because many tech solutions become commoditized and many tech solutions are so similar, and it comes down to features, and that's not where people win, right? They win this kind of battle of affection, because we still, even when you buy for a company, you still buy emotionally to some extent, and I think you want to kind of like connect with the people you buy with. So I think there's a big human side to it, even in B2B, that you cannot replace, right? And it's kind of tied to the personality of the people, the personality of the brand.
I agree with you. And there are some cases like this in the SaaS industry. Like if you like ask someone about automations, immediately they will think what you need is Zapier, right? Maybe they have never used Zapier. Maybe they've never set up a Zap with Zapier, never. But they know that when it comes to automations, Zapier. Another example, top of mind, when it comes to heat maps and like analytics on your web, Hotjar. Yep. Maybe this person has never like used Hotjar in their life, but they know that this is a brand when it comes to like this use case, right?
Exactly. For me, it's like example like Gong as well. I think that I think like for sales, listening on revenue intelligence, I think they call it. Like they've done a tremendous like brand work. Like I have never used Gong, but I feel like I know everyone at the company, so that's also one thing that is quite interesting. They've done a good work of building the brands through their people, and I think they're winning that battle of affection, right? Like people are just like really like them, right? So it's quite interesting. I think like I agree with you. I think that's brand has a bright future ahead.
Yeah, hopefully for people working, in brand.
Hopefully for me, right?
Yeah. Anyway, that was very insightful. Thank you very much, Gwen. Last question I have for you, call to action for our listeners. Where can people find out more about you and Sinch and get in touch if they'd like to?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active. So feel free to reach out, follow, DM me, comment on what I write. I'll be there for sure. And then Sinch, it's sinch.com. SINCH. You can find a lot about us there. So yeah.
That's great. Gwen, thank you very much for finding the time to do this. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Great, me too. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Before you go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part, you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free.